The cafe was quiet, one of those upscale spots tucked inside a glass building where golden light pooled softly around each table and smooth jazz filled the space. On any other night, it might have felt serene, but Melissa Walker's heart was pounding. She stepped in holding her 5-year-old son Ethan by the hand. Her white dress shifted gently with the breeze, elegant but modest. Her blonde hair was pinned back, though a few strands clung to her cheeks. She looked lovely, but tired, not from lack of rest, but from the weight of too many long days. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on him. Robert Carter. He looked exactly like the photo her friend had shown her. Sharp jawline, perfectly tailored, suit eyes the color of stormy skies. He sat straight, one hand resting on the table, composed but distant. Melissa hesitated, then led Ethan closer. "I'm so sorry I couldn't find anyone to watch him. I totally understand if—" Before she could finish, Ethan tilted his head, studying Robert. "You look like the man from the park. Are you still sad?" Robert froze. The voice, the tone, it was the same. 2 years ago, a rainy night, a park bench, a bottle in his hand, a tiny boy with big eyes offering him a tissue and saying, "It's okay to cry. My mom says hearts just need hugs sometimes." Robert had never forgotten that moment. Could never. That voice had anchored him. Now here that same voice stood living and breathing, looking up at him with quiet concern. Robert blinked, throat tight. Then slowly he smiled. "Don't apologize," his eyes still on Ethan. "I think I owe your son more than you know." Melissa paused, confused. "I... what?" Robert shook his head gently. "Please have a seat." Still unsure, she helped Ethan into the smaller chair and sat across from Robert. Ethan pulled out a small pack of crayons and started coloring on the kids' menu, like this was any normal evening. Robert watched him for a long beat, something unreadable in his expression. "He's sweet," Melissa smiled. "He's my whole world." They sat quietly, the sounds of clinking cups and soft conversation surrounding them. Melissa stirred her tea, uncertain how to start. She had not been on a date, if this even counted, in years. Robert leaned in slightly. "Has he always been this kind?" She glanced up. "What do you mean?" He nodded toward Ethan, who was now helping the waitress pick up a spoon someone had dropped. "This gentle, this aware." Melissa followed his gaze. "Yes, always. Even when he was little, he'd cry if another baby cried. He just feels things." Robert nodded, a small smile forming, but his eyes didn't match the smile. They held something else, a reverence, a quiet knowing. Melissa shifted in her seat. "I hope he's not too much. I didn't want to cancel last minute, but—" Robert looked back at her. "He's not too much, and neither are you." Melissa blinked. It had been so long since someone said that. She reached for her tea, hands slightly trembling. Robert noticed but said nothing. "Look," Ethan chirped, holding up his drawing. "It's us, Mommy, me, and you." Robert looked at the picture. 3 stick figures under a sun. One had long yellow hair. One wore a tie. The smallest held a balloon. A quiet warmth stirred in his chest. Melissa chuckled nervously. "He includes everyone." Robert smiled. "I'm honored." For the first time that evening, the silence between them felt calm. Not strained, not strange, just safe. Melissa leaned back, her fingers around the warm cup. Ethan rested against her shoulder. Across the table, Robert watched, feeling something shift inside him. Sometimes a 5-year-old saves your life, and sometimes the universe sends him back to show you how to live again. 2 years ago, everything was different. The rain came down in sheets, cold, relentless, and uncaring. Robert Carter sat on a weather-worn bench in the middle of an empty park, his $1,000 suit soaked through his phone, long dead. His mind, a blank tunnel of noise. He had not meant to end up there. He had driven with no direction, no plan, only a growing ache in his chest that had become too loud to ignore. Hours earlier, he had walked out of a boardroom and into silence. His name scrubbed off, the company he had built with his own hands, betrayed by Victor. His co-founder and best friend since college, cut out of his own vision. The papers signed, the locks changed security, escorting him out like a common criminal. And as if the universe had decided to make a show of cruelty, she had left too. Amanda, the woman he thought he would marry. 4 years together, vanished in a 15-minute conversation in their kitchen. She told him he had become too much, too distant, too broken. "No one stays with a sinking ship," she had said, her engagement ring placed neatly on the counter between them like a full stop at the end of a sentence. And Robert, he was sinking fast. That bench was supposed to be the last stop. The rain, a perfect metaphor. The world just distant enough to ignore his leaving. He sat there for what felt like hours, clutching a bottle of whiskey he had not opened but could not let go of. His head in his hands, suit heavy with water, heart heavier with failure. That was when he heard the footsteps. Small, uneven, childlike. A boy, maybe 4, maybe 5, stood in front of him, holding a crumpled tissue in one hand and wearing rain boots far too big for his feet. His jacket was slightly crooked, zipped up wrong, his nose a little runny, but his eyes wide, gentle, strangely calm. The boy reached out the tissue, his voice soft but clear. "Mister, it's okay to cry." Robert blinked. My mom says hearts just need hugs sometimes. That one sentence cracked something inside him. Something deep, something dark. Robert stared at the boy, stunned water running down his face. Some of it rain, some of it not. He did not know what made the boy stop. He did not know where the mother was. But in that moment, for the first time in months, he felt seen. Not as a failure, not as a CEO, just as a man whose heart had caved in. He had not spoken. He could not. But he had taken the tissue with shaking fingers, and the boy had simply smiled, then turned and skipped away toward a woman waiting under a distant tree. Her face had been hidden by a large umbrella, her hand reaching out for the boy's. Robert never forgot that night. He never forgot the boy's voice, that kindness, that absurd, innocent truth. Hearts just need hugs sometimes. He did not end his life. Instead, he went home. He opened his laptop. And for the first time in weeks, he wrote down an idea about emotional resilience, about AI, that could understand human empathy. Not just read patterns, but feel intention. It was the start of something new. Something slow, quiet, and deeply personal. He had always wondered about that boy. And now, sitting across from Melissa Walker in that quiet cafe, Robert watched as her son colored dinosaurs with half-broken crayons. His small mouth moved as he whispered stories to himself. And then, like a bell tolling from another lifetime, he tilted his head, looked at Robert, and said, "You look like the man from the park. Are you still sad?" Robert's heart stopped. The voice, the eyes, the gentle knowing in such a small face. It was him. This was the boy who saved him. His throat tightened, his hands curled into fists beneath the table to keep from trembling. He swallowed, forcing his voice steady, and offered a quiet smile. "Don't apologize," he said to Melissa. "I think I owe your son more than you know." He had not told her. Not yet. Somehow the words did not feel ready. But as Ethan continued coloring, humming softly, Robert watched him, this small, unknowingly heroic child, and felt something he had not in a very long time. Gratitude. And maybe for the first time since that rainy night, hope. The classroom smelled like crayons and construction paper. Melissa Walker stood at the whiteboard, chalk dust on her hands, surrounded by the giggles of second graders. Teaching had been her sanctuary, her joy. The walls were filled with color, student art, and the kind of warmth that made her feel like she belonged. But on that day, she did not go in. She had a sore throat. She asked her husband David to pick up Ethan from preschool. That one request unraveled everything. The accident was quick. A rainy intersection, a truck that skidded, a phone call that shattered her world. David never came home. She remembered the phone slipping from her hand. Ethan asking why Daddy was not back yet. The way she screamed into a pillow that night so her son would not hear her fall apart. Grief did not just break her. It reshaped her. She took a leave from school just for a while, she told herself. But returning meant passing the desk where David once left her coffee. It meant smiling through pain that refused to fade. She could not do it. Bills piled up. Sleep became a stranger. The once vibrant home turned quiet and cold. Eventually, she found work at a small bookstore. Quiet, unassuming, the kind of place that asked nothing of her but presence. On slow days, she brought Ethan. But even there, she apologized. "I'm sorry he's just a little fussy today. I'm sorry I'll need to leave early again. I'm sorry for the noise, the distraction, for everything." She said sorry so often it became reflex, a part of her voice. Her parents tried to help at first, but grief made them distant. David had been their pride, their hope. And though no one said it aloud, she felt it. The blame, the weight of their disappointment. Friends slowly faded. Invitations stopped. Melissa just endured. Only Ethan seemed to see her fully. One night as she tried to force a tired smile over burnt pasta, Ethan tugged at her sleeve. "Are you okay when you smile like that?" She blinked, then kissed his forehead, too choked up to answer. Ethan had always been like that, gentle, oddly perceptive for his age. When she looked tired, he would bring her a cookie. When she cried, he would crawl into her lap and just sit there wordless. He held her together with small, invisible threads. He was the reason she woke up. The reason she kept lists, paid bills, faced days she did not want to. He was all she had left of David. And somehow he was more than that. Still, Melissa never stopped feeling like a burden. When she brought Ethan to work, she apologized. When she dropped him off late at preschool, when she forgot to RSVP, when she dared to say she was tired or lonely, she apologized. It was not just grief over David, it was grief over herself, who she had been, who she could have been. Now she simply tried to be enough for Ethan. Some days it felt possible, other days she felt like a shadow wearing her own skin. But she kept going, always because Ethan needed her. Even when the world made her feel invisible, even when the whispers stung, she showed up for him. Melissa Walker was not fearless. She was not perfect. She cried in the shower, worried about bills, and sometimes yelled when she meant to whisper. But she was present. And every night after Ethan fell asleep, she kissed his forehead and whispered the only apology that mattered anymore. "I'm sorry the world makes it so hard, but I promise I'm trying." And in the dark with sleep tugging at his lashes, Ethan would murmur back, "I know." The invitation had come the next morning in the simplest form. An email. Subject: dinner body. No pressure, just food. Maybe the three of us this time. Melissa read it twice before showing it to Ethan, who immediately grinned and said, "Does that mean he liked us?" She smiled and tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "I think it means he wants to know us better." They met at a quiet, family-owned Italian place tucked between two brownstone buildings, warm lights spilling onto the sidewalk. Robert was already there, seated at a corner booth, wearing something less corporate this time, just a button-up and a soft navy sweater. He stood when they arrived, helping Ethan into the booth first, before turning to Melissa. "Thank you for coming." She nodded politely. "Thank you for inviting us." Dinner began with small talk. Ethan ordered spaghetti and promptly declared it was better than Mom's. "But don't tell her." Melissa laughed, a real sound this time, and Robert noticed the way her eyes crinkled when she did. Robert was quiet but attentive. He asked Ethan questions about his favorite dinosaurs, and to Melissa's surprise listened patiently as the little boy explained in great detail the difference between a Triceratops and a Stegosaurus. At one point, Melissa excused herself to the restroom. When she returned, she paused near the corner of the hallway. Robert was leaning across the table, whispering something to Ethan. "I think your mom is really brave." Ethan tilted his head. "She doesn't think so." "She will," Robert replied softly. Melissa's chest tightened. She did not know what stirred more, the way he said it or the fact that he meant it. After dinner, Robert suggested a walk. "There's a park nearby. Ethan might like the fountain." They agreed, strolling under the early evening sky. The city lights hummed, but in that little pocket of green, things felt still familiar. Ethan ran ahead, chasing shadows and leaves. Melissa and Robert walked side by side. For the first time, she noticed the quiet ease in his steps. Not the tension of a CEO pacing through decisions, but the peace of someone trying. "You're different tonight," she said. Robert looked over. "How so? Lighter?" He smiled, not the polite kind, a real one. "Maybe I am." Then came the moment. Ethan had paused to admire a squirrel, and Ethan glanced at Robert. "Are you lonely, Mr. Robert?" Robert blinked, his mouth parted slightly, surprised by the question. Then he crouched beside the boy, meeting his eyes. "I used to be." Ethan nodded as if that made perfect sense and returned to chasing squirrels. Melissa watched the exchange in silence, something warming in her chest. Later that night, Robert stepped aside to take a call while Melissa helped Ethan wash his hands at the park restroom. On her way back, she passed by the bench where Robert stood. He was speaking softly, unaware of her presence behind the row of hedges. "It has been weeks since the last one," he said into the phone. "The nightmares are gone since meeting them." A pause, then quieter. "No, I have not told her. I don't know how, but I know I am not the same." Melissa froze. The words landed like a quiet thunderclap. Something in her shifted. He had been through something dark, and her son, maybe even she, had helped him find his way out. She walked back to the bench, slowly giving him time to end the call. When he turned and saw her, he looked slightly startled, but not guilty. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." They said nothing else, but as they walked back toward the street, Melissa slipped her hand down and gently took hold of Ethan's. Robert walked beside them, close enough to touch, yet not imposing. And for the first time, she wondered maybe this was not just a dinner. Maybe it was a beginning. The lab was sleek and sterile, all white walls and glowing screens. Soft hums of machines layered under the quiet clicking of keyboards and murmurs of engineers. Robert stood near the glass entrance, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt as Melissa and Ethan stepped in. "This is impressive," Melissa whispered, eyes sweeping over the room. Robert smiled slightly, but his gaze had already shifted to Ethan, who stared wide-eyed at the robot in the center of the room. It was about the size of a small refrigerator, humanoid in shape, but still mechanical. Two blinking circles for eyes, arms with rounded joints, a soft plastic casing that gave it a child-safe appearance. "That's Emma," Robert said, "short for emotional mapping and adaptive intelligence." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Does she talk?" "She tries," one of the engineers said, chuckling softly. "But she is not very good at feelings yet." Robert led them closer. "We have been developing Emma for over a year. She is supposed to recognize emotional cues, facial expressions, tone, body language, and respond accordingly. But she struggles with unpredictability." Melissa gave a sympathetic nod. "Sounds a little like parenting." Robert smiled again, more real this time. "Exactly." Ethan stepped forward unprompted and crouched in front of Emma. The robot blinked slowly, then turned its head toward the boy. "Hello," Emma said in a flat tone. "How are you feeling today?" Ethan tilted his head. "You sound nervous." "I do not experience nervousness." "You kinda do," Ethan said, poking gently at the robot's foot. "You talk like you're scared of saying the wrong thing." Robert and Melissa exchanged a glance. "I'm not mad," Ethan added, as if comforting a real person. "Sometimes I get scared too, like when I spill milk and I think Mom won't love me anymore." There was a sudden stillness in the room. Emma blinked again, then paused, an unnatural delay in her usual automated response. Robert's brow furrowed. Then Emma spoke again, but this time something was different. "That must feel confusing, thinking love can disappear when mistakes happen. But your mom still loves you even with spilled milk." A hush fell over the lab. One of the engineers stood up from his console, stunned. That was not pre-coded. That was adaptive responsive. That was Emma processing in real time. Robert stared at the robot, then at Ethan, his pulse picking up. He had spent months with teams of experts coding layers of empathy, language, and logic into that machine. They ran thousands of simulations, rewrote emotional response scripts, tweaked algorithms to mimic understanding. Nothing had worked until now, and all it took was a child telling the truth. Robert knelt slowly beside Ethan. "Do you know what you just did?" Ethan shrugged, picking at a thread on his sleeve. "I just talked to her like she has feelings too." Robert's throat tightened. He looked up at Melissa, who stood frozen near the table, one hand covering her mouth, eyes brimming. She had heard it too. The unfiltered wisdom of a 5-year-old and the way it had unlocked something no team of engineers could. His robot, had finally worked. Not because of code or wires, but because of something human, something simple, something that had been missing all along. Robert stood walking over to the main terminal. The data stream confirmed what he already knew. Emma had recognized the emotional subtext, interpreted the context, and generated a unique, emotionally attuned response. It had happened because of Ethan, because of the boy who once saved him with a simple phrase in the park. Robert turned back to them, a look on his face that Melissa had never seen before. Something between awe and humility. "He did it," Robert said quietly. "He got through." Melissa frowned slightly. "Through to the robot?" "No," Robert replied, voice rough. "Through to me again." He walked over, crouched in front of Ethan, and rested a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered. Ethan beamed, completely unaware of what he had just changed. And in that moment, Robert knew. This child was not just a miracle from Melissa's past. He was the missing piece to Robert's future. It happened on a Tuesday, Melissa had just returned from her lunch break at the small bookstore when her manager, an older woman named Helen, pulled her aside. The look on her face said everything. "I'm sorry, Melissa," Helen began, not meeting her eyes. "The higher-ups don't want children in the store during work hours anymore. They said it's unprofessional." Melissa froze, then only stays in the back with a coloring book. "I know," Helen said gently, "but rules are rules, and the owners are watching closely these days. I tried to fight for you, but—" Melissa did not cry, not in front of Helen. She just nodded, packed up her things, and walked out with Ethan's tiny hand clutched tightly in hers. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Melissa sat at the kitchen table in silence. Bills stacked like guilt in a drawer she had not opened in days. She stared at them blankly, unsure what to do next. 2 days later, a letter arrived in her mailbox. It was from a local library. A part-time position had just opened, a children's reading assistant. The letter said she came highly recommended. Melissa blinked. She had not applied. Something in her chest tightened. The next morning, she showed up at the library for the informal interview. The director greeted her warmly, already seeming to know everything about her experience. When Melissa asked who had recommended her, the director smiled. "It came through someone named Robert Carter. Said he knew how much the community needed someone like you." The air left her lungs. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Melissa sat on her small sofa in the dark, staring at her phone. Finally, she typed a message. "Meet me tomorrow. Just us." Robert arrived at the quiet diner exactly on time. He looked tired in a way she had not noticed before. She did not offer small talk. "I found out about the library," Melissa said plainly. Robert paused, then nodded. "I thought you would." She leaned forward, her voice low. "Why didn't you tell me?" He met her eyes steady. "Because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything." "That's exactly what it feels like," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Like I'm part of some emotional debt repayment plan." Robert's brows knit. "That is not—" "Is this about gratitude?" she asked. "Or guilt?" The question hung between them, heavy and pointed. Robert leaned back slowly, the silence thick. "Maybe both," he admitted. "I do feel grateful for you, for Ethan. But it is not guilt, Melissa, not pity. I just wanted to help." She stood. "I don't need saving, Robert. I needed honesty." He stood too instinctively, as if trying to reach her. But she had already turned. "I can't do this," she said, barely above a whisper. "Not if I'm always going to wonder why." She left, and Robert stood in the doorway of the diner as rain began to fall outside, soft at first, then stronger, soaking through his shirt. He made no move to run. For the first time in a long time, he felt helpless. Not because he had no power, but because power could not fix this. That night, Melissa returned home soaked from the walk. She wrapped Ethan in blankets and tucked him in her heart, aching, her mind spinning. The next morning, she opened her front door and nearly stepped on a paper bag sitting quietly on her doormat. Inside was a book, Teaching with Heart Lessons from a Classroom Soul. It was one of her favorites, an out-of-print copy she had lent to a student years ago and never saw again. And inside on the title page was a note written in Robert's clean handwriting. "I didn't try to fix your life. I just wanted to thank the woman who taught her son how to save others." Melissa stared at the words until her vision blurred. It was not an apology. It was not an explanation. It was truth. Quiet, unspoken, but real. And though she would not text him back that day or the next, a part of her heart whispered what her pride could not yet say. "He sees me." And that scared her more than anything else. 5 days passed without a word. Melissa moved through her routine, waking Ethan, making breakfast, dropping him at preschool, working her last shifts at the bookstore. But Robert's note lingered, a gentle presence in her thoughts. On the 6th day, her phone lit up with a simple message. "Ethan mentioned dinosaurs last week. The Natural History Museum has a new exhibit. No pressure." She stared at the words for a long time before showing Ethan, who immediately jumped up and down. "Can we go, please?" His excitement was pure, uncomplicated. Melissa envied that. They met Robert at the museum steps the following Saturday. It was a crisp autumn morning, leaves spiraling down around them as families streamed past. Robert wore jeans and a casual sweater, so different from the CEO she'd first met. When Ethan spotted him, he ran ahead, all caution forgotten. "Mr. Robert, did you know T-Rex had teeth as big as bananas?" Robert crouched down, meeting Ethan at eye level. "I did not know that. Will you teach me more inside?" Ethan nodded solemnly, accepting the responsibility. "I know lots about dinosaurs. Melissa approached more slowly, clutching her purse strap. Thank you for the book. Robert straightened, a cautious smile forming. Thank you for coming today. The museum buzzed with life children pointing at massive skeletons. Parents reading plaques allowed the echoing sounds of wonder in high ceilings. Ethan darted from exhibit to exhibit, his energy seemingly limitless. Robert stayed close but gave Melissa space, never pushing, never presuming. When Ethan asked questions about extinction or fossils, Robert didn't simplify his answers. He spoke to him like a person, not a child, and Melissa noticed. By the time they reached the planetarium, something had shifted. The tension in Melissa's shoulders had eased. When Ethan grabbed both their hands to pull them toward the star show, she didn't pull away. They sat in the darkness, artificial stars spinning above them, Ethan between them with his head tilted back in awe. Robert glanced over, catching Melissa's eye in the dim blue light. She didn't look away. After the museum, they found a small cafe across the street. Ethan, exhausted from excitement, leaned against Melissa, with heavy eyes sipping hot chocolate. I should get him home for a nap, she said, watching Ethan's eyelids droop. Robert nodded, then hesitated. Would it be all right if I call you later this week just to talk? The old fear flickered briefly, the worry of owing, of being a project, of being seen too clearly. But beneath it, something else pushed through, something that felt like possibility. Yes, she said simply, that would be all right. Robert walked them to their car, helping Melissa secure a sleepy Ethan in his booster seat. Before closing the door, he leaned in and whispered to the boy, Thank you for teaching me about dinosaurs today. Ethan smiled drowsily. Next time I'll teach you about sharks. Next time. The words hung in the air between them as Robert stepped back. Melissa started the car, rolled down her window. Robert? She began, her voice finding it a strength she hadn't felt in months. I don't need to be saved, but I think maybe I'm ready to be seen. His expression softened, understanding washing over him. I'd like that very much. As she drove away, Melissa glanced in the rearview mirror. Robert stood on the sidewalk watching them go, a man granted something he hadn't expected, a second chance. And for the first time since David died, Melissa felt something beyond grief and duty, something fragile and new, like the first green shoot after a long winter. She couldn't name it yet, but it felt like the beginning of healing. Melissa received another package 3 days later. This time, a faded cardboard box sat on her doorstep as she returned from dropping Ethan at preschool. Inside lay an antique edition of Education Through Wonder by Margaret Holloway, a rare teaching philosophy book she'd mentioned during their museum visit. Its leather binding was worn at the edges, pages yellowed with time, but intact. A small note nestled between the pages. I'm not trying to fix your life. I just want to thank the woman who taught her son how to save others. Melissa traced her fingers over the embossed title. She'd searched for this book for years after her university professor had shown their class his personal copy. The message was the same as the one in the previous book, but something about seeing it twice made it sink deeper. She placed it carefully on her bookshelf, next to the framed photo of David holding newborn Ethan. That evening, she sent a text. The book is beautiful. Thank you. 3 dots appeared, immediately disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, would you like to get coffee sometime, just to talk? Melissa stared at her phone thumb, hovering over the screen. Behind her, Ethan's dinosaurs were scattered across the living room floor, casualties of an imaginary meteor. The apartment felt smaller each day, the walls closer, the ceiling lower. She thought of Robert's face at the museum, how he'd listened to Ethan with genuine interest, never once checking his phone or rushing them along. Saturday morning, there's a playground near Westside Coffee where Ethan could play. His response came quickly. Perfect. The playground buzzed with weekend energy, children climbing, swinging their voices, carrying on the crisp autumn air. Melissa sat on a bench, coffee warming her hands, watching Ethan conquer the jungle gym. Robert appeared beside her, 2 fresh pastries on a small plate. I noticed you didn't eat anything inside. Melissa accepted the offering with a small smile. I usually save my appetite for Ethan's leftovers. Motherhood economics. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Ethan make friends with a boy his age, their superhero, capes fluttering as they raced around the equipment. You're good with him, Melissa finally said. Most adults tune out when children start their dinosaur lectures. Robert's eyes remained on Ethan. Children see things we train ourselves to ignore. I find that fascinating. The playground filled with more families. A father pushed his daughter on the swings, her laughter pealing through the air. Melissa's grip tightened on her coffee cup. It must be hard, Robert said softly, watching other families. She hadn't expected such direct acknowledgement. Most people avoided mentioning her loss as if it might be contagious. Sometimes I forget he's gone. I'll see something funny and think I have to tell David about this. Then I remember. Robert nodded. Grief isn't linear. You sound like you know from experience. He turned toward her eyes, reflecting something distant. My father died when I was in college. Heart attack during a business meeting. He was the most driven man I've ever known, worked 80-hour weeks, built his company from nothing. At his funeral, his business partners gave these glowing speeches about his vision, his work ethic. But I kept thinking I don't have a single memory of playing catch with him or him attending any school events. Melissa watched his profile, seeing new layers. Is that why you work so hard to finish what he started? A flicker of surprise crossed his face. I never thought of it that way, but maybe, or maybe I'm trying to prove I can succeed without becoming him. He glanced at his watch, an understated but clearly expensive model, though the hours aren't much different. Ethan rushed over, cheeks flushed from play. Mr. Robert, come see the fort we built. Robert stood immediately, allowing himself to be pulled toward a precarious structure of sticks propped against the slide. Melissa watched as he crouched down, examining the construction with exaggerated interest, offering suggestions that made both boys beam with pride. Something warm unfurled in her chest, not quite happiness, but adjacent to it. Like coming in from the cold and feeling circulation return to numbed fingers, painful but promising. When they parted that afternoon, Robert hesitated beside her car. Same time next week. The question held no pressure, no expectation. Just possibility. We'd like that, she answered, surprising herself with how much she meant it. The playground became their Saturday routine. Sometimes they walked to the nearby duck pond, Ethan naming each bird with inventive authority. Other times they explored the children's section of the library, where Melissa now worked 3 afternoons a week. Robert never pushed for more, never asked to see her without Ethan, never made her feel rushed or indebted. He simply showed up present and patient. One Saturday, he brought a small kite for Ethan, a dinosaur-shaped creation that danced above the park. As Ethan ran across the open field, the kite soaring behind him, Robert's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening momentarily. 5 missed calls from Victor. Everything okay? Melissa asked. Robert slipped the phone back into his pocket. Just work, nothing important. But she caught the subtle shift in his demeanor, a guardedness that hadn't been there moments before. Later that afternoon, Robert invited them to his home for the first time, a modern house nestled against a wooded area at the edge of the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows invited nature inside warm wood and cool steel balancing each other throughout the open space. This is where you live. Ethan's eyes widened, taking in the spiral staircase leading to a second floor. It's like a spaceship, Robert laughed. I've never thought of it that way, but you're right. While Robert showed Ethan the backyard with its small stream and visiting wildlife, Melissa wandered through the living room. Unlike the sterile, magazine-perfect space she'd expected, Robert's home contained evidence of actual living books with dog-eared pages, a half-finished chess game on a side table, framed photographs of places rather than people. She paused in the hallway, noticing the bathroom door ajar. Without thinking, she pushed it open, looking for a hand towel. Her eyes fell on the medicine cabinet, its door slightly open. Inside, a prescription bottle stood prominently labeled, Carter Robert, Prazosin HCl 2 ml. Take 1 tablet at bedtime for nightmares. Refills 3. Nightmares. The word from his phone conversation weeks ago echoed back to her. She closed the cabinet quickly, feeling like an intruder. When she rejoined them in the kitchen, Robert was teaching Ethan how to make homemade pizza flour, dusting both their shirts. Neither noticed her thoughtful gaze or how she studied Robert's face for signs of the darkness he kept so carefully hidden. That night, after tucking Ethan into bed, Melissa sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of tea, thinking about medicine cabinets and missed calls about nightmares and quiet battles fought behind composed exteriors. She thought about her own carefully maintained facade, the strength she projected while feeling paper-thin inside. Maybe what drew her to Robert wasn't just his kindness to Ethan or his patience with her boundaries. Maybe it was recognition, one survivor seeing another. The corporate headquarters of Carter Innovations occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower. Robert straightened his tie as the elevator climbed, mentally preparing for the confrontation ahead. His assistant had confirmed that Victor had indeed scheduled himself for a 9 a.m. meeting without prior approval. The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area where Nancy, his longtime assistant, waited with concern etched across her features. "He's already in the conference room with Janice from legal." Robert nodded, maintaining his composure despite the warning bells ringing in his mind. Victor bringing legal representation meant this wasn't a casual visit. The conference room fell silent as Robert entered. Victor Ross lounged at the head of the table, Robert's usual seat, his tailored Italian suit and carefully styled hair, a deliberate contrast to the man he'd once called his best friend. Beside him sat a sharp-featured woman with a leather portfolio open before her. "Bobby finally decided to join us." Victor's voice carried the false warmth he reserved for negotiations. "You're looking well. Less fragile than the last time I saw you." Robert remained standing, one hand resting on the back of a chair. "What can I do for you, Victor?" Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Always straight to business. That's what I miss about working with you." He nodded to Janice, who slid a document across the polished table. "I'm here with a proposition. Acceleron Technologies wants to acquire Carter Innovations." Robert didn't touch the paper. "Acceleron, your new company. Our valuation is excellent. The offer is more than fair, especially for a startup barely 2 years old." Robert finally took a seat, his movements deliberate. "We've posted growth for 6 consecutive quarters. Our Emma prototype is showing remarkable progress. Why would I sell now?" Victor leaned forward, dropping his congenial mask. "Because you don't have a choice, Bobby. Your Series B funding round is stalling. 2 of your major investors are getting cold feet." The information hit like a physical blow. Robert had only shared those details with his executive team yesterday. "And you know this, how? Does it matter? What matters is I'm offering you a lifeline, a generous exit before things get ugly." Robert studied the man across from him, the same man who'd been his roommate in college, his best man, his business partner for 8 years. The same man who had orchestrated his removal from their previous company during his darkest moment. "And if I decline," Victor's expression hardened, "then I'll be forced to remind potential investors about your episode. A CEO who has a complete breakdown disappears for a night only to be found crying on a park bench, not exactly inspiring confidence." The words landed with precision, calculated to wound. Robert kept his expression neutral, despite the fury building beneath his skin. "You've been having me followed." Victor shrugged. "Let's call it due diligence. Speaking of which, you've been spending a lot of time with a certain single mother and her kid. Moving a bit fast after Amanda, aren't you? Or is this some kind of redemption project?" Robert's hand clenched under the table, knuckles white. "Leave them out of this." "Touchy subject, interesting." Victor gathered his papers, signaling the meeting's end. "Review the offer. You have 48 hours before I start making calls to your investors." He paused at the door. "Oh, and Bobby, the board at Acceleron would welcome you in a senior technical position. Not leadership, of course, but somewhere you could contribute without the pressures of executive decisions." After they left, Robert remained motionless in the empty conference room, Victor's threat expanding to fill the space. He'd rebuilt his life carefully after losing everything: his company, his fiancée, nearly his will to live. Now Victor threatened not just his new company, but Melissa and Ethan too. His phone vibrated with a text from Melissa. "Ethan's school play is tonight at 7. He asked if you might come. No pressure." Robert stared at the message, a lifeline amid the storm. 2 worlds colliding: the cutthroat business arena where he'd spent most of his adult life, and the gentle healing space he'd found with Melissa and Ethan. For the first time, he understood they couldn't remain separate forever. The elementary school auditorium hummed with excitement, parents clutching programs and flowers, siblings squirming in uncomfortable clothes, teachers herding small actors backstage. Melissa saved a seat beside her, scanning the entrance with each new arrival. When Robert appeared in the doorway, still in his business suit, but with his tie loosened, relief washed over her face. He navigated the crowded aisle, apologizing to parents as he squeezed past. "Sorry I'm late, work emergency." Melissa noticed the tension around his eyes, the tightness in his shoulders. "Everything okay?" He managed a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It is now. The lights dimmed, and children dressed as various woodland creatures took the stage. Ethan appeared as a majestic stegosaurus, naturally his handmade costume slightly lopsided, but enthusiastic in execution. When he spotted Robert in the audience, his face lit up mid-song. Melissa leaned closer, her voice barely audible. He practiced his lines for you all week. Something shifted in Robert's expression, a softening, a return to the present moment. His work problems seemed to recede as he focused entirely on the small dinosaur proudly reciting facts about the Jurassic period. After the play, Ethan ran to them clutching a papier-mâché egg. "Did you see me roar? Ms. Jenkins said I was the scariest dinosaur even though stegosauruses were actually plant eaters." Robert crouched down to examine the egg. "The scariest and the smartest. Your costume is amazing. Mom helped me make it. She stayed up really late gluing the plates." Melissa blushed slightly at the revelation of her late-night craft sessions. "Pizza to celebrate the star performer." As they walked toward the parking lot, other families streaming around them, a voice called out across the crowd, Melissa Walker." She turned to see an older couple approaching the woman, tall and stern, the man shorter with David's eyes. Her in-laws, Eleanor and Richard Thompson, whom she hadn't seen in over 6 months. Eleanor Richard, what a surprise. Melissa's posture stiffened, her hand automatically finding Ethan's shoulder. Eleanor's gaze darted between Melissa and Robert, then settled on Ethan. "We came to see our grandson perform, of course." "I didn't know you were coming." Richard looked uncomfortable. "We called your old number. When it didn't work, we contacted the school directly." Eleanor's attention fixed on Robert, her assessment almost clinical. "And who might this be?" Before Melissa could answer, Ethan piped up, "That's Mr. Robert. He teaches me about science and builds robots that can feel things." An awkward silence descended. Robert extended his hand professionally. "Robert Carter, I'm a friend of the family." Eleanor's handshake was brief, dismissive. "The family? How interesting." Her eyes returned to Melissa, sharp with accusation. "We haven't heard from you in months, and now we find you have moved on so quickly." The crowded school hallway suddenly felt exposed, dozens of other families within earshot. Melissa's cheeks burned. "This isn't the place, Eleanor." "When is the place? You've shut us out of Ethan's life, our only connection to David." Robert stepped slightly forward, his voice low but firm. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you, Mr. Carter." Ethan tugged at Melissa's hand, confusion clouding his face. "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us?" The innocent question hung in the air, a perfect distillation of the tension. Melissa crouched down to Ethan's level. "No, sweetie. They're not mad. They just miss you and Daddy very much." Eleanor's expression softened marginally at the mention of her son. "We do miss you, Ethan. Very much." Richard finally spoke, his voice gentler than his wife's. "We'd like to see more of you, buddy. Maybe you could visit us sometimes." Melissa straightened, finding her resolve. "Why don't you come over for lunch on Sunday? We can talk then." She emphasized the "we," making it clear Robert wouldn't be part of this particular conversation. Eleanor nodded stiffly, her eyes still fixed on Robert with undisguised suspicion. "Sunday then, we'll bring dessert." As they walked away, Ethan looked up at the adults with confusion. Why did Grandma look angry at Mr. Robert? He didn't do anything wrong. Melissa and Robert exchanged glances over Ethan's head, a world of complication in that simple question. "Sometimes adults have big feelings that are hard to explain," Melissa finally answered. "Let's get that pizza, okay?" But the celebratory mood had evaporated. During dinner, Ethan chattered happily, oblivious to the new tension between the adults. Robert was quieter than usual, his mind clearly elsewhere. Melissa found herself wondering if she'd made a mistake inviting her in-laws back into their carefully constructed new reality. Later, after Ethan was asleep, Robert and Melissa sat on her small apartment balcony, the city lights glimmering below them. "I'm sorry about Eleanor and Richard. They've been difficult since David died." Robert swirled his coffee, watching the dark liquid catch the moonlight. "They're grieving. Grief makes people desperate to hold on to whatever remains. They barely visited when David was alive. Now they act like they have some claim on Ethan." "Do they?" Melissa looked sharply at him. "What do you mean? They're his grandparents, his connection to his father." "I know that. I've never kept Ethan from them." They're the ones who pulled away after the funeral like being around us was too painful. Melissa's fingers tightened around her mug. Now they show up unannounced and look at you like you're desecrating David's memory. Robert was silent for a long moment. Maybe they're afraid. Of what? Of being replaced, of losing their son all over again, if you and Ethan build a new life that doesn't include them. The insight struck Melissa unexpectedly, not because it was profound, but because it revealed how deeply Robert understood loss. Is that what happened with your father? After he died? Robert's expression shifted subtly. My mother remarried within a year. A nice enough man, but determined to erase all traces of my father from our lives. New house, new schools, new family photos without the old ones. It was like my father had never existed. Understanding bloomed between them, the delicate balance of honoring what was lost while still moving forward. I would never erase David from Ethan's life, Melissa said softly. He's in Ethan's smile and the way he tilts his head when he's confused, just like David did. I know. The simple acknowledgement warmed her more than she expected. Robert wasn't threatened by David's memory. He understood its importance. There's something else. Robert began, setting down his mug. Something I should tell you. He hesitated, weighing his words. My former business partner, Victor, has made an offer to buy my company. It's not a friendly offer. Melissa listened as Robert explained the situation, the hostile takeover attempt, Victor's threats, the precarious position of his investors. He mentioned you and Ethan. Robert finished, his voice tight with controlled anger. Just in passing, but it was clearly a warning that he's been having me followed. Melissa's blood ran cold at the thought of being watched, of Ethan being observed by strangers. What are you going to do? Fight him, of course, but it might get ugly. Victor knows things about me, about my darkest moment, that could damage my reputation with investors. The night in the park, Melissa said quietly, when you met Ethan. Robert nodded, unable to meet her eyes. I've never told anyone the full story, how close I came to. He couldn't finish, but he didn't need to. Melissa reached across the small table, her fingers finding his. You survived it. That's what matters. His hand turned to hold hers, the contact grounding them both. I don't want Victor's vendetta to touch you or Ethan. If it would be easier for you to step back until this is resolved, is that what you want? Robert finally met her gaze. No, but I want you to be safe more than I want you in my life. The statement hung between them, raw in its honesty. Melissa studied their joined hands, her smaller one with a fading ink stain from the library, his stronger one with a small scar across the knuckles. I think we both spent enough time choosing safety over connection, don't you? Something shifted in Robert's expression, a release of tension he'd been carrying all evening. I should go. You have your in-laws coming Sunday, and I have some strategic planning to do. At the door, he paused. Thank you for listening, for understanding. Melissa stood on tiptoe and placed a gentle kiss on his cheek. That's what friends do. But as she closed the door behind him, she wondered if friendship was still the right word for what was growing between them. Sunday lunch with the Thompsons was exactly as uncomfortable as Melissa had anticipated. Eleanor examined the apartment with barely concealed disapproval, noting the smallness of the space, the second-hand furniture, the walls that needed repainting. Richard seemed lost, following his wife's lead while sneaking apologetic glances at Melissa. Only Ethan remained unaffected, proudly showing his grandparents his rock collection and dinosaur figures. After lunch, Melissa suggested he play in his room while the adults talked. So, Eleanor began once Ethan was out of earshot. This Robert person, how long has that been going on? Melissa kept her voice even. Robert is a friend. He's been kind to Ethan and me during a difficult time. And you don't think it's too soon? David has only been gone 2 years. The accusation stung, even though Melissa had anticipated it. There's no timeline for grief, Eleanor. There's appropriateness, Eleanor countered. What will Ethan think seeing his mother replace his father so quickly? Richard placed a restraining hand on his wife's arm. Eleanor, please. Melissa took a deep breath, fighting to maintain her composure. No one is replacing David. No one could. But Ethan deserves joy in his life. So do I. And this man brings you joy. Eleanor's tone made the question sound like an accusation. He brings normalcy, kindness, stability. Melissa met her mother-in-law's gaze directly. things that have been in short supply since David died. We offered to help, Eleanor protested. We offered to have you move in with us. You offered to take over. There's a difference. The truth of the statement silenced Eleanor momentarily. Richard cleared his throat. We're concerned, that's all. We don't know this man, and suddenly he's spending time with our grandson. Robert is a good person. He's patient with Ethan, respectful of my boundaries, and he understands grief. Melissa softened her tone. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm asking for your trust that I would never put Ethan in a harmful situation. Eleanor's eyes welled with unexpected tears. We just miss him so much. David was our only child. Ethan is all we have left of him. The raw pain in her voice broke through Melissa's defenses. For the first time, she truly saw beyond Eleanor's controlling behavior to the devastation beneath. I know. I miss him too every day. Melissa hesitated, then offered an olive branch. Maybe you could take Ethan for an overnight visit soon. He loves your pond in the treehouse. The suggestion visibly moved both grandparents. Richard smiled warmly. We could take him fishing. I've been fixing up the old rowboat. He'd love that. The conversation shifted to logistics when they could visit what Ethan's favorite foods were, now his new fascination with space, in addition to dinosaurs. By the time they left, a tentative peace had been established. Watching their car pull away, Melissa felt both drained and relieved. One battle navigated, yet she sensed more challenging ones ahead. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under her door like an assassin's blade. The building had been sold to developers. All tenants had 60 days to vacate. Melissa stared at the official document, her mind racing through calculations, the cost of moving new deposits, the impossibility of finding affordable housing in the same school district. Her savings had been depleted during the months after David's death. The library position helped, but not enough for this. She sat heavily at the kitchen table, the notice mocking her newfound stability. Just when things were beginning to feel manageable, Ethan settling in at school, her in-laws cautiously reintegrating into their lives, her relationship with Robert evolving into something deep and meaningful. This new crisis threatened to unravel everything. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert, conference call running late, rain check on dinner tonight. She almost replied with a casual acceptance, not wanting to burden him with her problems. But hadn't they just promised honesty to each other? With shaking fingers, she typed, no problem. Also just got eviction notice. Building sold. Have 60 days. His response came immediately. Coming over, 20 minutes. True to his word, Robert arrived at her door 19 minutes later, slightly out of breath, as if he'd run from his car. He took the notice from her trembling hands, reading it carefully before setting it aside. There are options, Melissa. She paced the small living room, anxiety radiating from her movements. What options? Rents have skyrocketed in this area. Even if I could find something affordable, the deposit alone would wipe out my savings. Robert hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I have a guest house on my property. It's separate from the main house with its own entrance and yard. You and Ethan could stay there while you figure things out. Melissa stopped pacing, the offer hanging between them like a live wire. Robert, it's not charity, he added quickly. You could contribute whatever you feel comfortable with. The place sits empty most of the time anyway. That's not, I can't just move in with you. Not with me. Near me, there's a difference. He softened his tone. At least come see it before you decide. Melissa wrapped her arms around herself, torn between pride and practicality. What would Ethan think? What would people think? Does it matter what people think if you and Ethan are safe and stable? Of course it matters. My in-laws already think I'm betraying David's memory by being friends with you. If we moved into your property, Robert stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. This isn't about me wanting more from our relationship, Melissa. This is about offering a solution to a practical problem. One friend helping another. She looked into his eyes, searching for hidden motives, but finding only genuine concern. I need to think about it. Talk to Ethan. Of course. No pressure. He glanced at his watch. I have to fly to San Francisco tomorrow morning. Investor meetings that can't be postponed. But I'll be back Friday evening. We can talk more then. Melissa nodded, noticing the strain around his eyes, remembering his own battles with Victor. Is everything okay with your company? A shadow crossed his face. I'm handling it. These meetings are crucial, but I'm confident. She didn't quite believe him, but appreciated his attempt to shield her from additional worry. Good luck then. Call when you can. After he left, Melissa sat in the quiet apartment, the eviction notice still on the table. Robert's offer swirled in her mind, the practical solution it presented versus the complications it would create. Moving to his property would intensify their connection, blur boundaries they'd carefully maintained. It would also provide stability for Ethan during yet another transition. The thought of starting over again exhausted her to her core. How many times could a person rebuild before the foundation itself gave way? The San Francisco conference room overlooked the bay fog rolling in like nature's curtain across the water. Robert stood at the front presenting data on Emma's development to a panel of potential investors. Charts displayed emotional recognition, accuracy rates, comparison, metrics against competitors, potential market applications. What sets Emma apart is her ability to recognize not just surface emotions, but contextual emotional states. Robert explained, advancing to a video demonstration. Watch as she distinguishes between different types of sadness, grief versus disappointment versus situational melancholy. The investors leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. Even Marcus Henley, the most skeptical among them, nodded appreciatively. Impressive tech, Robert. But what's your timeline to market? AI is moving fast, and emotion recognition isn't unique to your platform. Robert advanced to the next slide. What is unique is our approach. We're not just recognizing emotions, we're responding appropriately to them. Our pilot program begins next month in 3 pediatric hospitals using Emma to help children process trauma and fear during extended treatments. The presentation continued smoothly, questions answered confidently, objectives clarified. By the final slide, Robert could sense the room's energy had shifted from skepticism to interest. Marcus closed his portfolio. Well, I think I speak for all of us when I say we're intrigued. Your vision has merit, and the medical applications provide both social value and revenue potential. Relief washed through Robert. These investors could secure Emma's future, protect his company from Victor's takeover attempt. He began gathering his materials as the investors filed out, several stopping to shake his hand and exchange cards. Marcus lingered behind. One more thing, Robert. We've heard some concerns about your stability. Rumors about a breakdown a couple years back. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Who mentioned this? Does it matter? What matters is your response. Marcus's expression remained neutral. We're considering investing significant capital in your vision. We need assurance you're the right person to execute it. Robert straightened, meeting the challenge directly. 2 years ago, I lost my company and my fiancée in the same week. I hit bottom, yes. Then I built myself back up, developed new technology, secured initial funding, assembled a talented team, and created what you just saw. Judge me by my actions since then, not by rumors spread by competitors with ulterior motives. Marcus studied him, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. We'll be in touch early next week with our decision. Robert's phone buzzed as he left the building. A text from Melissa. Ethan has 103 fever. Took him to urgent care. They're transferring us to Children's Hospital downtown. Doctors concerned about his breathing. The world tilted beneath Robert's feet. He read the message again, adrenaline surging through his system. His next investor meeting, the final one, potentially the most important, started in 30 minutes across town. Without hesitation, he called his assistant. Nancy, cancel the West Ridge meeting. Family emergency. Book me on the next flight home. Nancy's voice reflected her surprise. Sir Westridge specifically rearranged their schedule for you. Their fund would completely secure our position against. I understand the stakes, cancel it anyway. Then book that flight. Robert hailed a taxi to the airport, his mind racing between calculated losses and urgent fears. Missing the Westridge meeting could cost him his company. Victor would pounce on the vulnerability, accelerate his takeover attempts. Years of work could unravel. Yet the thought of Melissa alone in a hospital with Ethan, scared and uncertain, overshadowed even these monumental concerns. At the airport, he managed to secure a seat on a flight leaving in 40 minutes. While waiting at the gate, his phone rang with Westridge Capital's number. He let it go to voicemail. A text from Victor followed almost immediately. Heard you stood up, Westridge. Reconsidering my offer yet? Robert closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. Then he called Melissa. Her voice came through, tight with worry. "Robert, I'm on my way. Flight leaves soon, should land by 6 p.m. How is he?" "They're saying pneumonia. They want to keep him overnight, maybe longer. His oxygen levels are low." Her voice broke slightly. "I'm scared, Robert." "I'll be there as soon as possible." "Which hospital?" "Children's Memorial, East Wing, room 37. "Did you call anyone else, your parents, the Thompsons?" A hollow laugh escaped her. "My parents are in Arizona." The Thompsons didn't answer. "I called Helen from the bookstore. My neighbor even tried the library. No one picked up. It's like the universe wanted to remind me how alone I really am." "You're not alone. I'm coming. Just hold on." The flight seemed interminable, each minute stretching painfully, as Robert imagined Melissa sitting beside a hospital bed, no one to spell her for even a bathroom break or a quick meal. The irony didn't escape him that his most important professional moment coincided with this personal crisis, forcing a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. By the time his plane landed, 3 more missed calls from Westridge had accumulated, along with an email from his CFO marked "Urgent Investor Concerns." Robert ignored them all, sprinting through the terminal to the taxi stand. The hospital corridors echoed with his hurried footsteps as he followed signs to the pediatric ward. Room 307's door stood partially open, the soft beeping of monitors filtering into the hallway. Robert paused at the threshold, taking in the scene. Ethan lay small and pale against the white sheets, an oxygen tube beneath his nose, an IV in his tiny arm. Melissa sat beside him, her hand resting on his dark circles beneath her eyes, suggesting she hadn't slept. She looked up as Robert entered, surprise and relief washing over her exhausted features. "You came." Robert moved to her side, one hand gently touching her shoulder. "Of course I came. But your meeting wasn't important." Melissa's eyes filled with tears she'd likely been holding back for hours. "The doctor says his left lung is inflamed. They're giving him antibiotics and monitoring his oxygen." Robert pulled a chair beside hers, settling in for the duration. "Has he been awake?" "In and out. The fever makes him confused." As if on cue, Ethan stirred, eyelids fluttering open. His gaze, unfocused, at first drifted around the room before settling on Robert. Recognition sparked in his fever-bright eyes. "Dad!" The word was barely a whisper, rough from his sore throat. Robert froze. Melissa's breath caught audibly. Ethan's small hand reached toward him. "Dad," he repeated, more certain this time. "You came." Something broke open in Robert's chest, a dam rupturing, emotions flooding through. Tears welled in his eyes before he could stop them. He took Ethan's outstretched hand between both of his, pressing his forehead against their joined fingers. "I'm here, buddy." He managed, voice thick with emotion. "I'm right here." Melissa stood silently, moving toward the door. Robert glanced up, catching her eye, worried she was upset by Ethan's confusion. Instead, he saw her watching them with an expression of profound realization, as if seeing clearly for the first time something that had been before her all along. She slipped into the hallway, giving them a moment alone. Robert sat with Ethan until the boy drifted back to sleep, still holding his hand, unwilling to break the connection. When Melissa returned, she carried 2 paper cups of vending machine coffee. She handed one to Robert, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "You didn't have to leave your meeting," she said softly. "I would have understood." Robert looked up at her, no longer hiding the depth of his feeling. There was never a choice to make, not really. Understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement that something fundamental had shifted. In Ethan's feverish mistake, a truth had been revealed that could no longer be ignored or minimized. They sat together through the night, taking turns dozing in the uncomfortable chairs, speaking in quiet tones about everything and nothing. Somewhere around 3 a.m., Melissa found herself telling Robert about the night she'd met David, a blind date set up by mutual friends, his nervous jokes, the immediate sense of recognition she'd felt. It wasn't dramatic or earth-shattering, she admitted, just a feeling of rightness, like finding a puzzle piece you didn't know was missing. Robert nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. By morning, Ethan's fever had broken. His breathing improved enough that the doctor suggested he might go home the following day if his progress continued. Throughout the rounds, medications, and tests, Robert remained alternating between answering urgent work emails and entertaining Ethan with increasingly elaborate stories about dinosaurs who built robots. Around noon, a nurse entered with a tablet. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter. The insurance department needs some additional information." Before either could correct her assumption, a new voice came from the doorway. "She's not Mrs. Carter. She's Mrs. Thompson, my daughter-in-law." Eleanor stood in the entrance, Richard behind her, both looking travel-worn and alarmed. Their eyes moved from Melissa to Robert to Ethan, assessing the tableau with obvious disapproval. "Grandpa," Ethan's face lit up despite his illness. "You came to see me in the hospital." Eleanor moved to Ethan's bedside opposite Robert. "Of course we did, sweetheart. As soon as we got your mother's message." "That was yesterday morning," Melissa said quietly, the accusation clear in her tone. "We were in Cincinnati for Richard's college reunion," Eleanor replied defensively. "We drove straight through once we got your voicemail." Her attention returned to Robert, who had stood respectfully when they entered. "I see you didn't need our help after all." The tension in the room thickened. A nurse, sensing the charged atmosphere, quickly finished her paperwork and retreated. "Mr. Carter was kind enough to come when I called," Melissa said, her voice gaining strength. "He's been here all night." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "How fortunate you have such a devoted friend." Robert cleared his throat. "I should give you all some family time. Ethan, I'll come back later. Okay, buddy." "Promise?" Ethan's voice sounded small and worried. "I promise." As Robert gathered his jacket, Eleanor followed him into the hallway, pulling the door partially closed behind them. Her voice, though hushed, carried an unmistakable edge. "I don't know what your intentions are with my daughter-in-law and grandson, but they are still grieving, still vulnerable." Robert met her gaze steadily. "I'm well aware of that, Mrs. Thompson." "Are you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're taking advantage of a widow's loneliness and a little boy's need for a father figure." The accusation stung, but Robert maintained his composure. "I respect your concern for your family, but you should know Melissa is one of the strongest people I've ever met. She doesn't need saving or protection. She needs support and understanding." Eleanor's posture remained rigid. "My son was her husband, Ethan's father, barely in his grave and already being replaced." "No one is replacing David," Robert said firmly. "Certainly not me. Ethan will always know his father through stories and memories, yours, Melissa's, and anyone else who loved him." For a moment, Eleanor's facade cracked, revealing the grief beneath her anger. "He called you Dad," the nurse told us when we arrived. Robert sighed, understanding the real source of her pain. He was delirious with fever. Confused. Was he expressing something he's been encouraged to feel? Before Robert could respond, the door opened, fully revealing Melissa standing there, her expression making it clear she'd heard everything. "That's enough, Eleanor." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Robert has shown Ethan nothing but kindness and respect. He's never once tried to replace David or erase his memory." Eleanor turned to her, tears threatening. "You're moving on as if David never existed." "Moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means living." Melissa stepped closer to Robert, her decision visibly solidifying. "Robert should stay. He's important to Ethan. And to me." The declaration hung in the air between them, Eleanor's disapproval radiating like heat. Finally, she nodded stiffly. "It's your life, Melissa. Your choice." She turned back toward Ethan's room. "We'll be with our grandson." After she left, Melissa let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry." Robert shook his head. "Don't be. She's protecting her son's memory. I understand that." "Stay," Melissa said, reaching for his hand. "Please." Their fingers intertwined, a silent affirmation of what had been building between them for months. In the sterile hospital corridor, surrounded by the sounds of machines and hurried footsteps, they stood together. Two people who had survived loss and found each other in the aftermath. Later, as afternoon stretched into evening, an unexpected visitor arrived at Ethan's room. Victor Ross walked in confidently, a large stuffed dinosaur under one arm, his smile calculated. "I heard the little guy was sick," he announced, his eyes finding Robert immediately. "Thought I'd drop by with a get-well gift." The room froze in collective shock. Eleanor and Richard looked confused. Melissa tensed visibly. Robert stood, positioning himself between Victor and Ethan's bed. "How did you know that Ethan was here?" Victor's smile didn't waver. "I have my sources. More importantly, how did your meeting with Westridge go?" "Oh wait, you weren't there." Understanding dawned on Melissa's face. This was the business rival Robert had mentioned, the one threatening his company. Perhaps we should speak outside, Robert suggested, his voice dangerously calm. Victor placed the dinosaur at the foot of Ethan's bed, then turned to Melissa with practiced charm. You must be Melissa. Victor Ross. Robert and I go way back. I know exactly who you are, Melissa replied coldly. Victor's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. He's told you about me. I'm flattered. You should leave, Robert said, no longer bothering to hide his anger. Now. So hostile, Bobby, and here I came bearing gifts and good news. Victor straightened his designer tie. Westridge Investment Group has decided to back Acceleron's acquisition of Carter Innovations. Signed the preliminary agreement this morning. The blow landed precisely as intended. Robert's face drained of color. You're lying. Check your email or call them yourself. Victor shrugged. Can't say I blame them. A CEO who abandons critical meetings for personal matters, not exactly leadership material. Robert's hands clenched at his sides. Melissa moved to stand beside him, her presence steady and grounding. Get out, she said simply. Victor's expression hardened. Excuse me. You heard me? This is my son's hospital room, not your boardroom. Get out. Victor looked between them, a new calculation forming behind his eyes. Well, well, the devoted mother and the white knight. How touching. He stepped closer to Robert, lowering his voice. Was it worth it, Bobby, throwing away everything we built for this domestic fantasy? Robert met his gaze without flinching. Yes. The simple answer seemed to catch Victor off guard. He recovered quickly, plastering on his corporate smile once more. We'll discuss the transition details next week. My lawyers will be in touch. He nodded to the others in the room. Lovely meeting you all. Speedy recovery, kid. After Victor left the room, remained silent. Eleanor and Richard exchanged confused glances. Ethan, who had watched the exchange with wide eyes, finally spoke. I don't like that man. He talks nice, but he feels mean. The simple observation broke the tension. Robert smiled despite everything, ruffling Ethan's hair gently. Smart kid. Melissa touched Robert's arm. Your company is what he said true. Robert nodded grimly. Probably. I'll need to make some calls, but if Westridge backed out, Victor will have the leverage he needs. Because you came here instead of meeting with them. Melissa realized guilt washing over her face. Robert, I'm so sorry. Don't be. His voice was firm, certain. I made the right choice. Eleanor watched this exchange with new eyes, seeing something in Robert she hadn't before, not an opportunist, but a man who had just sacrificed something enormous for her daughter-in-law and grandson. You missed an important meeting to be here, she asked quietly. Robert glanced at her, surprised by her interest. Yes? For Ethan. For both of them. Something shifted in Eleanor's expression, not acceptance, not yet, but a crack in her resistance. She nodded once, then returned her attention to Ethan. Later, as darkness fell outside the hospital windows, Robert stepped into the hallway to make the calls he'd been avoiding. As expected, Westridge had indeed backed Victor's play. The carefully rebuilt company Robert had poured himself into for 2 years was slipping through his fingers. When he returned to Ethan's room, he found Eleanor and Richard preparing to leave for their hotel. Richard shook his hand awkwardly on the way out. Eleanor paused beside him. You really care about them, don't you? It wasn't quite a question, and more than I can say. She studied him for a long moment. David was a wonderful father. I know. Ethan deserves that same kind of love. Robert met her gaze directly. I agree. Eleanor nodded, a truce of sorts established. Good night, Mr. Carter. After they left, Melissa settled into the recliner beside Ethan's bed, exhaustion etched into every line of her body. Robert took the chair on the other side, his own fatigue catching up with him. I've been thinking about your offer, Melissa said softly, watching Ethan sleep. The guest house. Robert looked up surprised. You don't have to decide now. There's plenty of time. I know, but seeing you here today, watching you with Ethan, she met his eyes across the bed. I think it would be good for us. For all of us. The simple statement contained multitudes' acknowledgement of their deepening connection, recognition of the family they were tentatively forming, acceptance of a future neither had imagined possible. Are you sure? Melissa nodded, a tired smile touching her lips. Sometimes the hardest choices are the simplest ones, aren't they? As if in agreement, Ethan shifted in his sleep, one small hand reaching out unconsciously. Robert took it gently in his own, the connection bridging the hospital bed past to future loss to possibility, solitude to family. Outside, rain began to fall against the window. Not the desperate downpour of that night in the park 2 years ago, but a gentle cleansing shower washing away what was nourishing what could be. 3 months after Ethan's hospitalization, spring bloomed across Robert's property. The main house stood proud on the gentle slope, large windows reflecting morning light. 50 yards away, nestled among flowering dogwoods, the guest house had transformed into a true home. Melissa's touch was evident everywhere. Colorful curtains framing windows, children's artwork taped to the refrigerator, a small vegetable garden taking root beside the porch. Inside, Melissa arranged chairs in a semicircle, while Ethan carefully placed name cards on each seat. Today marked the official opening of her home teaching program. 3 students with special learning needs would arrive within the hour. "Do you think they'll like our classroom?" Ethan straightened a wobbly chair, his expression serious. Melissa surveyed the converted living room bookshelves lined with educational materials, a whiteboard mounted on the wall, learning stations organized by subject. "I think they'll love it." Ethan nodded solemnly, then brightened as he spotted movement through the window. "Robert's coming." Robert approached the guest house carrying a large package wrapped in brown paper. Since Melissa and Ethan had moved in, he'd maintained a respectful distance, present, but never imposing, supportive, but never overstepping. They shared dinners 3 or 4 times a week, weekend outings, quiet evenings on the porch after Ethan was asleep, but Robert was careful to give them space to establish their own routine. "Special delivery for Walker Academy," he announced, setting the package on the table. Ethan bounced on his toes. "What is it?" "Open it and see, Biome." Together, Melissa and Ethan unwrapped the gift, a handcrafted wooden sign reading Walker Learning Center. In elegant lettering, small educational symbols carved into the border. "It's beautiful." Melissa ran her fingers over the smooth finish. "Did you make this?" Robert nodded, pride mixing with shyness. "Woodworking's been a hobby since high school. Never have enough time for it, but this felt important." The simple gift represented more than decoration. It was recognition, validation of Melissa's new beginning. After years of apologizing for her existence, of feeling like a burden, here was physical proof of her value, her purpose. "We'll hang it right by the entrance," she decided, blinking back unexpected tears. Ethan tugged at Robert's sleeve. "Will you stay and meet my new friends?" Robert glanced at Melissa, waiting for her cue. This was her domain, her professional space. She nodded, appreciating his sensitivity. "I'd love to, but just for a few minutes. This is your mom's classroom after all." As if on cue, gravel crunched in the driveway, the first student arriving. Melissa squared her shoulders, teacher mode activating. Showtime. By lunchtime, the inaugural session of Walker Learning Center was a tentative success. 3 children, Maya with her selective mutism, Zach struggling with dyslexia, and Joey with ADHD, had settled into the gentle structure Melissa created. Robert had made himself scarce after brief introductions, heading to his home office to tackle the mounting challenges at his company. Victor's takeover was proceeding despite Robert's legal attempts to block it. Without Westridge's investment, Carter Innovations faced a cash flow crisis. The MMA project remained viable but underfunded. Robert had been forced to lay off 3 engineers already, with more cuts looming. Yet watching Melissa flourish, seeing Ethan thrive in their new environment, Robert couldn't summon true regret for the choice he'd made that day in San Francisco. Some sacrifices counted as investments of a different kind. That evening, after the students had gone and Ethan was absorbed in a dinosaur documentary, Melissa joined Robert on the main house's back deck. The setting sun painted the sky in watercolors, silhouetting the distant mountains. "Thank you for the sign. It meant more than I can say." Robert handed her a glass of wine. "How was the first day?" "Challenging, rewarding, exhausting." Melissa laughed softly. "Everything teaching should be." Comfortable silence settled between them as they watched fireflies begin their evening dance over the lawn. Melissa studied Robert's profile, noting the new lines around his eyes, the slight furrow that hadn't been there 3 months ago. "Any news about your company?" His expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Victor's lawyers submitted the final acquisition offer today. The board is reviewing it, but without alternative financing." He shrugged, leaving the inevitable conclusion unspoken. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Companies come and go. Some things matter more." His eyes drifted toward the guest house where Ethan's small silhouette moved past a lit window. Melissa covered his hand with hers. What about Emma? All that work, all that potential. The prototype is stable. That's something. Robert's thumb traced small circles against her palm. Victor wants the technology, not the vision behind it. He'll probably strip it down, integrate the recognition algorithms into surveillance systems or marketing tools. Can you stop him? Legally, no. The intellectual property belongs to the company. Frustration edged his voice. The irony is we're closer than ever to a breakthrough. After Ethan's interaction with the prototype, we completely restructured Emma's emotional learning pathways. The results have been remarkable. Melissa squeezed his hand. Then we find another way. The simple "we" lodged in Robert's chest like a warm coal. Throughout his adult life, problems had been his alone to solve: business challenges, personal setbacks, all faced in essential solitude. Even with Amanda, there had always been a divide between his struggles and their relationship. This felt different, unsettling and comforting simultaneously. I've been thinking, Melissa continued, about taking Ethan to visit my parents in Arizona next month. They haven't seen him since David's funeral, and the school break seems like good timing. The apparent change of subject took Robert by surprise. That sounds important. How long would you be gone? A week, maybe 10 days? She hesitated. Would you mind watching the house while we're away? Of course not. I can water the plants, bring in the mail. Melissa took a deep breath. Actually, I was hoping you might join us. Meet my parents. The invitation hung in the twilight air between them, weighty with implication, rich with possibility. Meeting parents represented a threshold, a declaration of seriousness neither had verbalized. Are you sure it's a big step? I'm sure. Her voice steadied, gaining confidence. We've been dancing around definitions for months, Robert. Whatever this is between us, and I think we both know what it is, it's time to acknowledge it. Out loud, to ourselves and to others. Before he could respond, headlights swept across the driveway. A familiar black Mercedes pulled up its engine, purring expensively in the evening quiet. Victor Ross stepped out immaculate in a tailored suit despite the hour. His confident stride carried him toward the deck, a manila envelope in his manicured hand. Evening, lovebirds. Hope I'm not interrupting. Robert stood instinctively, placing himself between Victor and Melissa. What are you doing here, Victor? Delivering good news personally. The board approved the acquisition. All that's left is your signature. He extended the envelope. Thought you'd appreciate the courtesy, given our history. Robert made no move to accept the documents. You could have had your lawyers send these, boy. And miss seeing your domestic bliss. Victor's gaze swept over the property, lingering on the guest house. Quite the picture. EO turned family man. Very heartwarming. Melissa rose, her posture radiating quiet dignity. I'll check on Ethan. She touched Robert's shoulder briefly, then walked toward the guest house, ignoring Victor entirely. Victor watched her go, a calculating smile playing at his lips. Smart move, Bobby. When the company's sinking, grab a life raft. Any port in a storm, right? Say what you came to say, then leave. Such hostility. Victor sighed dramatically. Fine. Here's what's happening. The board voted unanimously to accept Acceleron's offer. You have 48 hours to sign these papers, or we proceed with a hostile takeover. Either way, Carter Innovations becomes a subsidiary of Acceleron Technologies by the end of the week. Robert accepted the envelope, his face expressionless. Is that all, Mom? Almost. Victor's tone shifted, becoming unexpectedly sincere. The offer includes a position for you, Bobby, Chief Innovation Officer, full research budget, creative control over new projects. Not Emma, that's already allocated elsewhere, but anything else you want to develop. Surprise flickered across Robert's features. Why would you want me involved? Because despite everything, you're brilliant. Your vision for emotional AI was revolutionary, just ahead of its time, and hampered by your, Victor gestured vaguely, personal complications. Under proper management with adequate resources, you could create something truly valuable. The unexpected praise carried its own kind of sting, acknowledgement of talent, tainted by dismissal of character. Robert weighed the envelope in his hand, feeling the weight of surrender it represented. I'll review the terms. Do that. Victor started toward his car, then paused. One more thing. That offer expires if I have to take the company forcibly. Consider it my final gesture toward our old friendship. After Victor's car disappeared down the driveway, Robert remained on the deck, the legal documents heavy in his hands. The fading twilight deepened to true darkness, stars emerging overhead in silent witness. From the guest house window, Melissa watched him, a solitary figure outlined against the night shoulders, bearing invisible weight. Her heart ached at the distance. She couldn't bridge the battle. She couldn't fight for him. Later, after checking that Ethan was asleep, she returned to the main house. She found Robert in his study papers spread across his desk, the acquisition offer, dissected into constituent parts. "What will you do?" Robert looked up, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "What would you do?" The question surprised her, not the seeking of advice, but the genuine valuing of her perspective. "Tell me what's at stake first, in simple terms." Robert gestured to the document piles. "If I sign, Victor gets my company, my technology, everything I've built since that night in the park. But I get a senior position, financial security, creative freedom to start new projects. And if you don't sign, he takes it anyway through legal channels. I get nothing except the satisfaction of making him work for it." A grim smile touched his lips. "And I lose my last chance to protect Emma's potential." Melissa considered carefully, understanding this wasn't just about business, but about identity, purpose, the future Robert had rebuilt from ashes. "What does Emma mean to you, beyond the technology, beyond the company? What matters most about it?" The question penetrated through layers of corporate thinking to the core truth. Robert was silent for a long moment, gaze turned inward. "It started as my way back to humanity. After losing everything after that night when Ethan found me, I needed to believe that emotional connection could be taught, could be learned even by something that wasn't born with it." He looked at her directly. "Because I needed to believe I could learn it too." Understanding bloomed across Melissa's features. "And have you learned it every day? With you? With Ethan?" His voice softened. "That's why losing Emma feels like losing part of myself. But fighting Victor means risking what little I have left." Melissa moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk. "Then don't fight on his terms. Change the battlefield." "What do you mean?" "You created Emma to help people understand emotions, to bridge gaps between human hearts. Does that purpose change because the ownership does?" Robert frowned. "Victor will repurpose the technology, use it for profit, not healing. Then save what matters before you sign. The core purpose, the healing potential." Her eyes lit with growing conviction. "The hospitals you mentioned, there's the pediatric trial program. Could you establish that independently? Get Emma into children's hospitals now before the takeover." A spark kindled in Robert's expression, possibilities unfurling. "Create a separate nonprofit entity. License the existing prototype for medical applications before signing." "Exactly. Victor gets the company, but the soul of Emma, the part that matters most already, belongs to those who need it." Robert stood abruptly, energy replacing resignation. "I need to call my lawyers. Tonight." Melissa smiled, recognizing the return of the determined man she'd come to love. "I'll make coffee." As she turned to leave, Robert caught her hand. "Melissa, thank you." "For what?" "For seeing what I couldn't. For reminding me why I started all this." His fingers interlaced with hers. "And yes, I'd love to meet your parents." The unexpected shift made her laugh, tension breaking. "Good, because I already told them we're coming." The next 72 hours passed in a whirlwind of legal consultations, late-night strategy sessions, and hurried preparations. Robert assembled a skeleton team of his most trusted engineers and researchers, working around the clock to document Emma's protocols and establish the framework for what they were now calling the Ethan Protocol, a nonprofit initiative to place emotional intelligence AI companions in children's hospitals. By the time Robert signed the acquisition papers in Victor's downtown office, the first 3 Emma units were already being installed in pediatric wards across the country, their operating parameters secured under charitable licensing agreements Victor couldn't touch. Victor's expression when he realized what Robert had done, outmaneuvered while appearing to surrender, shifted from triumph to grudging respect. "Clever move, Bobby. Very clever." Robert pocketed his copy of the agreement, a weight lifting from his shoulders. I learned from the best, Victor. The hospital program won't make you rich. I'm not looking to get rich, just to finish what I started. Victor studied him, genuine curiosity replacing calculation. You've changed. Yes, Robert had offered no explanation beyond the simple acknowledgement. As he left Victor's office for the last time, Robert felt neither victory nor defeat, only the quiet certainty of purpose redirected. Carter Innovations would become another corporate acquisition, another footnote in business journals. But the Ethan protocol would continue, would grow, would heal. Some losses cleared the way for more meaningful gains. The weekend brought Ethan's first overnight visit with the Thompsons. After the hospital confrontation, Eleanor and Richard had maintained cautious but consistent contact. Sunday phone calls, occasional dinners, small steps toward a new kind of relationship. When Richard arrived to pick up Ethan, the boy bounced between excitement and anxiety, his backpack clutched tight against his chest. You'll call me tonight before bedtime. Melissa knelt to straighten his jacket. Absolutely, and you have my number memorized, right? And Robert's too, in case of emergencies. Richard watched this exchange with a wistful expression. We have the fishing gear all ready. The pond's full of bluegill this time of year. Robert stepped forward, offering a small paper bag. Almost forgot. Ethan's special bait, guaranteed to catch the big ones. Ethan's eyes widened as he accepted this unexpected treasure. Richard extended his hand to Robert, a gesture that would have been unthinkable 3 months earlier. We'll take good care of him. I know you will. After they departed, Melissa and Robert stood in the driveway watching until the car disappeared around the bend. The property felt suddenly quiet, the absence of Ethan's energy creating a palpable void. First time you've been apart overnight. Melissa nodded, vulnerability written across her features. Is it terrible that I'm both sad and relieved? Robert chuckled softly. Sounds perfectly normal to me. What should we do with all this unexpected freedom? Dinner out, movie. Actually, Robert took her hand, guiding her toward his car. I have something to show you. They drove through the countryside, spring greenery blurring past the windows. Robert maintained an air of mystery about their destination, answering Melissa's questions with cryptic smiles. Eventually, they turned onto a narrow lane leading to a small converted barn. A discreet sign announced Riverside Art Collective in hand-painted letters. Inside, the renovated space housed an airy gallery filled with local artwork, paintings, sculptures, mixed media displays, illuminated by natural light from skylights. It's lovely, Melissa admitted, puzzled by the purpose of their visit. But why? Her question died as they rounded a corner into a small alcove. There on pristine white walls hung a collection of framed children's artwork, vibrant, uninhibited expressions of joy, fear, hope, and wonder. The Healing Arts Program, Robert explained, from Children's Memorial. These were created by pediatric patients working with the first Emma prototype. Melissa moved closer, studying the paintings. Each bore a small plaque with the child's first name, age, and a brief quote about their experience. One in particular brought her attention, a swirl of dark blues and purples, with a small golden light at the center. The artist's 7-year-old Lily had named it Finding Brave. They're incredible. The hospital reports that children open up to Emma differently than to human therapists. There's no fear of judgment, no self-consciousness. Pride and wonder mingled in Robert's voice. We've already received requests from 5 more hospitals to join the program. Melissa turned to him, eyes bright with unshed tears. This is what it was always meant to be, isn't it? This is Emma's true purpose. Yes, and none of it would have happened without you and Ethan. Robert guided her to a small bench facing the exhibition. There's something else I wanted to talk about. Away from home with just us. The sudden seriousness in his tone sent a flutter of anticipation through Melissa's chest. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just important. Robert took a deep breath. The Ethan protocol is expanding faster than I anticipated. We need dedicated leadership, someone who understands both the educational and emotional components. You're looking for a director. I'm looking for a partner, in every sense. His eyes held hers steadily. The organization needs you, Melissa. Your background in education, your intuitive understanding of how children learn and feel. You'd be perfect. She blinked, processing the unexpected offer. You want me to work with you? I want you to work with me, live with me, build a life with me. The words tumbled out with gathering momentum. These past months watching you create your teaching center, seeing you rebuild your confidence, your purpose, it's been humbling and inspiring. You're extraordinary, Melissa and I. Robert. She placed her fingers gently against his lips, stopping the flow of words. Are you offering me a job or are you proposing? A smile spread beneath her fingertips. Both, I suppose, though I'm making a mess of the latter. Melissa lowered her hand, her expression softening. I can't accept either. Not yet. Pain flashed across his features before he could mask it. I understand it's too soon. No, that's not it. She took his hands in hers. I can't accept because there are things you don't know, things I haven't told you. What thing? Melissa looked away, gathering courage. When David died, I didn't just lose my husband. I lost myself. The grief was consuming. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't care for Ethan properly. That's normal after such a loss. It went beyond normal grief. I had thoughts, dark thoughts about joining David, about ending the pain. Her voice dropped to a whisper. If it hadn't been for Ethan needing me. Understanding dawned in Robert's eyes. The night in the park. When Ethan gave me the tissue, we were there because I couldn't bear to be in the house another minute. The walls were closing in. I was afraid of what I might do. Melissa's hands trembled in his. I walked Ethan to the park in the pouring rain because I needed to feel something, anything besides the emptiness. Melissa, I saw you there. On the bench, I recognized the look on your face because I'd seen it in my mirror. Her eyes met his unflinching despite her tears. I didn't send Ethan to you. He ran to you on his own while I was frozen, unable to move. He saved both of us that night. The revelation settled between them, the final piece of a puzzle neither had fully understood until now. Their connection wasn't coincidence or simple attraction, but something deeper forged in shared darkness, in parallel journeys back toward light. Robert reached out gently, brushing tears from her cheek. Why didn't you tell me? Shame at first, then fear that it would change how you saw me. She leaned into his touch. How could I accept your proposal without you knowing the whole truth? And now that I do, a small smile broke through her tears. Now you can ask me properly. Understanding her meaning, Robert slid from the bench to one knee, still holding her hands. No ring, no prepared speech, just raw, unvarnished truth. Melissa Walker, you and Ethan brought me back to life. You showed me what matters, what's worth fighting for, what's worth building. I love you both more than I thought possible. Will you marry me? Joy illuminated her face from within. Yes. The simple word echoed in the quiet gallery, a promise of beginning. Robert rose, drawing her into his embrace, their lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of tears and possibility. When they finally separated, Melissa laughed softly. Ethan's going to be thrilled. He's been dropping hints for weeks. Has he now? Oh yes. Very subtle ones like, when are you going to be my dad for real? And don't you think our house would be better if you lived in it too? Robert's heart swelled at the casual confirmation of what he'd hoped, but never assumed that Ethan wanted him as a father. We should pick him up early tomorrow, tell him together. Melissa nodded, happiness radiating from her like physical warmth. Eleanor and Richard too, they should hear it from us directly. The mention of the Thompsons sobered Robert slightly. Are you sure they might not take it well? They've come a long way, and this isn't about replacing David or erasing the past. It's about building something new that honors what came before. As if summoned by her words, Robert's phone rang, Eleanor's number appearing on the screen. A spike of concern shot through him as he answered. Eleanor, is everything all right? The conversation that followed was brief but alarming. Ethan had fallen while fishing, hitting his head on rocks near the pond. He was conscious but disoriented. They were en route to the emergency room. Robert relayed the information to Melissa as they hurried to the car, her face paling with each detail. The 40-minute drive to the hospital compressed into a blur of tense silence and reassurances neither fully believed. They found Eleanor in the waiting room, her normally perfect composure fractured by worry. Richard paced nearby, hands clasped behind his back, shoulders hunched with guilt. He was running along the pond edge, Eleanor explained, voice tight with restraint. We told him to slow down, but he was excited about catching his first fish. Then his foot slipped on the wet rocks. Where is he now? Melissa fought to keep panic from her voice. CT scan. The doctor was concerned about confusion. He kept asking for his dad. The last word hung awkwardly in the air between them. Eleanor's gaze shifted to Robert, something unspoken passing across her features. He was asking for you, she admitted quietly. By name. Before Robert could respond, a doctor appeared at the entrance to the waiting area. Family of Ethan Walker. All four adults moved forward simultaneously, a unified front that spoke volumes about the complex family they had become. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, addressed them collectively. Ethan has a mild concussion, but the CT scan shows no bleeding or serious trauma. We'd like to keep him overnight for observation standard protocol with head injuries in children. Relief washed through the group. Melissa found her voice first. Can we see him? Of course, he's been asking for his parents. Room 215 just down the hall. As they moved toward Ethan's room, Eleanor touched Melissa's arm, holding her back slightly. You and Robert go first. He's been asking for you both. It's a simple acknowledgement that Robert belonged at Ethan's bedside, that he held a place in their family structure, represented a monumental shift from Eleanor's previous resistance. Ethan lay small against the white hospital sheets, a bandage covering a cut on his forehead. His face brightened as Melissa and Robert entered. Mom, Robert, I caught a fish, but then I fell, and now my head hurts, and Grandma cried. Relief made Melissa's knees weak. She moved to the bedside, carefully embracing her son. You scared us, buddy. I'm okay. The doctor said I'm brave. Ethan's gaze shifted to Robert. Did you know the rocks by the pond are really slippery? Robert approached the bed, emotion tightening his throat. I'll remember that next time we go fishing. Will you stay with me, both of you? Ethan's small hand reached for Robert's. I don't like hospitals by myself. We're not going anywhere, Melissa promised, meeting Robert's eyes over Ethan's head. Silent understanding passed between them. This moment, this hospital room, this family unit now formed the center of their shared world. Eleanor and Richard entered quietly, hovering near the doorway until Ethan spotted them. Grandma, Grandpa, I'm getting ice cream because I was brave. The adults exchanged smiles at his resilience. Eleanor approached the bed cautiously. We were so worried about you, sweetheart. I'm okay. And look, Robert came just like last time I was in the hospital. An awkward silence descended as all the adults remembered the previous hospital stay, the tensions and revelations it had contained. Eleanor broke the stillness with unexpected grace. Yes, he did. He always comes when you need him. The simple statement, delivered without resentment or qualification, acknowledged what everyone in the room now understood, that Robert had earned his place in their unconventional family through consistent presence and unwavering care. Later, after Ethan had fallen asleep and the Thompsons had departed for the night, Melissa and Robert sat in the dim hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of monitors creating a lullaby of medical reassurance. I think we should tell him tomorrow, Melissa whispered, watching Ethan's peaceful breathing. About us getting married. Robert nodded his hand, finding hers in the semi-darkness. Eleanor and Richard, too. Yes, no more secrets, no more waiting for perfect moments. She squeezed his fingers. Life's too unpredictable. Speaking of unpredictable, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. Robert shifted slightly in the uncomfortable hospital chair. Would you mind if I legally adopted Ethan? After we're married, the question hung in the air, weighty with significance, with the ghost of David, with the future they were building together. You want to adopt him. More than anything, but only if you're comfortable with it. And Ethan, of course. Melissa was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on her sleeping son. David will always be his father. Nothing can change that. I know. I would never try to replace those memories or that bond. But Ethan deserves a dad who's here now, who can teach him to fish and build science projects and be there for school plays. Her eyes met Robert's, certainty replacing hesitation. Yes, I think it would be wonderful. Morning brought sunshine streaming through the hospital blinds, a doctor's clearance for Ethan's release, and the arrival of Eleanor and Richard bearing donuts and fresh clothes. As the adults prepared for discharge, Ethan announced with a child's perfect timing, Robert and Mom have something to tell him. Stiaim. All eyes turned to the couple. Melissa glanced at Robert, who nodded encouragingly. Well, Melissa began, suddenly nervous despite their planning. Robert and I have decided to get married. Ethan's reaction was instantaneous and joyful. Finally, does that mean Robert will be my dad for real? The pure excitement in his voice brought laughter from the adults, easing the moment's tension. Eleanor's expression remained carefully neutral, though Richard broke into a genuine smile. Congratulations to you both, he offered, extending his hand to Robert. Eleanor's response came more slowly. Measured words chosen with deliberate care. I hope you'll be very happy together. Though not effusive, the absence of objection represented its own kind of blessing. Melissa reached for Eleanor's hand, bridging the gap between past and future. We'd like you both to be part of the wedding, part of our lives going forward. Ethan needs his grandparents. Emotion flickered across Eleanor's composed features. We'd like that very much. Robert cleared his throat, addressing the Thompsons directly. There's something else. After we're married, I'd like to legally adopt Ethan, with your blessing, if possible. The request landed like a stone in still water ripples of implication spreading outward. Eleanor's hand tightened around Melissa's. You want to change his name, erase the Thompson connection? No, Robert answered quickly. Ethan would keep his last name. Walker Carter, perhaps, if Melissa agrees. This isn't about replacing David or diminishing his memory. It's about legally recognizing what's already true in our hearts, that Ethan is my son too. Eleanor's eyes filled with unexpected tears. For a moment, the composed matriarch vanished, revealing the grieving mother beneath. David loved him so much. I know, Robert said gently. I promise to honor that love every day. From his hospital bed, Ethan watched this adult conversation with solemn attention. Finally, he spoke with the direct simplicity only children can manage. I think Daddy would be okay with it. He wouldn't want me to not have a dad just because he had to go to heaven. Eleanor looked at her grandson, wisdom beyond his years, shining in his familiar eyes, David's eyes. Something released in her expression, a letting go. You're right, Ethan. Your father would want you to be happy. She turned to Robert, measuring him one final time. You'll be a good father to him. You already are. The blessing long withheld, but finally given, completed a circle none of them had imagined possible months earlier. Not forgetting, but moving forward. Not replacing, but adding. Not ending, but beginning anew. 6 weeks later, on a perfect June morning, the main house lawn transformed into an intimate wedding venue. White chairs formed a semicircle around a simple wooden arch Robert had crafted himself, decorated with wildflowers and green vines. Only 30 guests gathered, close friends, colleagues, family bound by both blood and choice. Ethan took his role as ring bearer with utmost seriousness, practicing his measured walk for days beforehand. Eleanor helped Melissa prepare in the guest house, their relationship now infused with mutual respect, if not yet easy affection. Richard stood with Robert near the arch, straightening the younger man's tie with paternal care. Nervous? Well, Robert smiled, surprising himself with his calm. Not about marrying Melissa, a little terrified about being a good husband and father. That's as it should be, Richard patted his shoulder awkwardly. David would have liked you, you know, once he got past the initial jealousy. The unexpected comment caught Robert off guard. Thank you for saying that. It's true, he valued honesty, loyalty, showing up when it matters. Richard glanced toward the guest house. You've done right by them. That's what counts in the end. Music began signaling the ceremony's start. Guests settled into their seats, conversations fading to expectant silence. Robert took his position beneath the arch, heart thundering, despite his outward composure. When Melissa appeared at the path's entrance, Ethan proudly at her side. Robert's breath caught in his throat. She wore a simple ivory dress, her blonde hair woven with small flowers, her smile radiant with certainty. Not a traditional bride by any measure, but perfect in her authenticity, in the strength she'd found through brokenness. As she walked toward him, Robert found himself remembering that rainy night in the park, the despair, the emptiness, the small boy with a tissue changing everything with one simple phrase. How could he have known then that the universe wasn't ending his story, but beginning a new chapter? Ethan delivered the rings with a flourish, then moved to stand between Eleanor and Richard in the front row. The officiant spoke of new beginnings, of families formed through choice, as well as chance of love that builds upon foundations rather than erasing them. When the moment came for vows, Robert took Melissa's hands in his, all prepared words, evaporating in the reality of her presence. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I sat alone in the rain, believing I had nothing left to offer anyone. Then your son found me and offered kindness when I least deserved it, but most needed it. His voice steadied, gaining strength. You both taught me that hearts don't break beyond repair. They just need the right kind of healing. I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of the family we've created together. Tears spilled freely down Melissa's cheeks as she responded, her voice clear despite her emotion. When David died, I thought I'd never feel whole again. I built walls around myself and Ethan, trying to protect what remained of my heart. But you didn't try to break those walls down. You just sat patiently outside until I was ready to open the door myself. She squeezed his hands. You showed me that loving again isn't betrayal, but the greatest honor I could pay to what was lost. I promise to walk beside you in all the chapters still to come. The exchange of rings, the pronouncement of marriage, the kiss that sealed their vows, all passed in a blur of joy and solemnity. As they turned to face their guests, now officially husband and wife, Ethan broke protocol by running forward to embrace them both. The photographer captured that unscripted moment: Melissa in her simple gown, Robert kneeling in his suit, Ethan with his arms thrown around both their necks, 3 separate journeys converging into one shared path forward. The reception unfolded on the lawn tables arranged beneath string lights that would illuminate the celebration as day faded to evening. Champagne flowed, music played, conversations and laughter mingled in the perfect summer air. Eleanor approached during a quiet moment when Robert stood alone watching Melissa dance with Ethan. I have something for you. She pressed a small object into his palm, a worn pocket watch, its gold case scratched from years of use. It was David's. His grandfather gave it to him on our wedding day. Robert stared at the unexpected gift, its weight significant beyond the physical. Eleanor, I can't accept this. It should go to Ethan when he's older. It will, but for now it belongs with the man who's raising his son. Her voice held no resentment, only quiet acceptance. David would want you to have it. Before Robert could respond, Victor Ross appeared at the edge of the reception area, his unexpected presence creating a ripple of tension. Robert excused himself from Eleanor and moved to intercept his former rival. Victor, this is a surprise. Relax, I'm not here to cause trouble. Victor looked almost uncomfortable in the informal setting, a corporate shark in waters too warm and shallow. I brought a gift. He extended a small envelope. For the happy couple. Robert accepted it cautiously. Thank you for coming. Actually, I came to tell you something in person. Victor glanced around the celebration, taking in the obvious happiness, the genuine connections. The Ethan protocol is expanding. 3 more hospitals signed on last week. I know, I'm still on the board. What you don't know is that Acceleron is matching the funding, dollar for dollar. Victor straightened his tie, avoiding direct eye contact. Anonymously, of course. Wouldn't want to ruin my cutthroat reputation. Stunned, Robert studied the man he'd once considered his greatest enemy. Why? Victor was silent for a moment, genuine emotion flickering across his usually calculated features. My sister had a daughter last month. Premature. She's in the NICU at Boston Children's. He met Robert's gaze directly. They're using one of your Emma units with the parents, teaching them how to connect with a baby they can't hold, can't take home. Understanding dawned slowly. And it's helping more than I would have thought possible. Victor shrugged, attempting to regain his characteristic nonchalance. Consider the funding a thank you. Or an apology. Whatever lets you sleep at night. Before Robert could respond, Victor nodded toward Melissa. She looks happy. You both do. We are. Good. That's good. Victor extended his hand formally. Congratulations, Robert. As Victor departed, Melissa approached, curiosity evident in her expression. Was that Victor? What did he want? Robert watched his former nemesis disappear down the driveway, a complex mixture of emotions swirling within him. To remind me that people can surprise you, even the ones you've written off completely. The celebration continued as evening descended, fairy lights twinkling in the growing darkness. After the cake was cut, the toasts delivered, Robert found a moment to slip away to the main house, retrieving something from his study. He returned to find Ethan demonstrating his dinosaur dance to amuse guests, Melissa watching with maternal pride. Robert approached the small box in his hand, drawing her attention. Another surprise, a gift for both of you. He opened the box, revealing two matching compasses, one large, one small, each engraved with the same words, "Always find your way home." Melissa's fingers traced the inscription, understanding its significance. For when we get lost. For when any of us needs reminding where we belong. Robert fastened the larger compass around her wrist. With each other. Ethan bounded over, excitement radiating from him in waves. Is that for me? Can I wear it now? Will it help me find dinosaur bones? Robert laughed, securing the smaller compass around Ethan's wrist. It might not find dinosaurs, but it will always help you find your way back to us. Ethan studied the instrument with solemn appreciation, then looked up with the piercing directness of childhood. Does this mean I can call you Dad now? For real? The simple question paused the world around them, creating a pocket of perfect stillness in the celebration's joyful chaos. Robert knelt to Ethan's level, meeting his eyes with equal seriousness. I would be honored if you called me Dad, but only if you want to, and only when you're ready. Ethan considered this with furrowed brow. I'm ready now. Then yes, you can call me Dad, for real. Ethan's face split into a radiant smile. Okay, Dad. He tested the word, found it satisfactory, then threw his arms around Robert's neck in a fierce hug. I'm going to show Grandma my compass. As he raced off toward Eleanor, Melissa slipped her hand into Robert's, helping him rise from his kneeling position. You okay? You look a little stunned. Robert shook his head in wonder. I just never imagined any of this. After that night in the park, I thought I was getting a second chance at life. I had no idea I was getting a second chance at happiness, too. Melissa leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder as they watched Ethan proudly displaying his compass to his grandparents. Sometimes the smallest hearts carry the biggest miracles, she murmured. And sometimes love finds you exactly when you need it most. Around them, friends and family celebrated, music played, laughter rose into the star-filled night. But in that moment, standing together on the lawn, where their separate journeys had finally converged, Robert and Melissa held the quiet certainty that whatever storms might come, they had found their true north in each other. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not replacement, but expansion. Not forgetting, but healing. Growing, building something new from the foundations of what came before. A family reborn through chance and choice, and the pure wisdom of a child who once offered a simple truth on a rainy night. Hearts just need hugs sometimes.